You know what Tolstoy said about families? All happy families are alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. Interesting, isn't it? All happy families are alike. All unhappy families are unhappy in their own way. So there's a sense almost of sort of isolation, and specialness and dug in to a particular type of dysfunction. It makes a certain kind of sense. Happy families are families that love one another, take care of one another, care for one another, love one another, feed one another, care for one another when they're sick, empathize, know what the other person is feeling, and respect that feeling. There's a film, I can't remember what it's called, it's a Japanese film. The film consists of a wandering Buddhist monk, and he's wandering around on pilgrimage between the training periods. And he's an older monk, and obviously it's someone who's been at the practice a long time, has found some sort of peace with it. So this monk is out wandering, and he happens by a house where a tremendous argument is taking place. The husband is blaming the wife for not sweeping the porch, and the wife is then blaming the children and scolding them and beating them. And an old man who appears to be maybe a father-in-law is then being scolded by the mother, and this very, very unhappy family. The monk stops, and he looks at, you can see him looking at the situation and thinking, so he goes over and he picks up the broom and he starts to sweep the porch. And he sweeps the porch, and he sweeps it really carefully. And he looks around and he sees things that people are complaining about, and he does them each in turn until he's basically done all the things that people were dissatisfied with. And then he goes on his way. And the people in the movie come along and find the things all done, right? And then they begin to treat one another differently. And by the end of the movie, everybody's sitting around having dinner together and laughing, and all is sort of forgiven. And the monk is long since gone. He's just taken off, not particularly attached to this as a good deed, right? So the moral of the story is that he looks at this mess and said, oh, this is my mess. I better clean it up. It's a beautiful teaching about taking responsibility for things that don't seem to be our responsibility even. There's this wonderful little prayer that is used at the beginning of and end of every 12-step meeting, the world over, pretty much. And it goes like this: God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. And this is a wonderful little, almost magical sorting device, because it allows us to sort out what we're responsible for and what we're not responsible for, what we can do and what we can't in any situation. And it's a beautiful tool because it allows us to go through our day and to look at situations that may need to be changed, and to figure out whether we can change them or not, and to ask ourselves very honestly whether we can change them or not, right? And then to ask, as it does in the prayer, for the serenity, the courage, and the wisdom to know how to sort those things out. Serenity comes first. That's peace of mind. I think in the movie, the monk is sort of a symbol for that serenity, because he has this shaved head, he has very few possessions, he's obviously, a person who's very relaxed. Just the way he walks along and carries himself indicates that he's a person who's has cultivated a lot of serenity. And he comes along and he sees this situation. What he can't change is he can't change the people. Each person in this stuck situation is unhappy in his or her own way. And then he looks a little further and sees what he can change, and he's had the wisdom to know what he can and can't do. So when we see something like this, it's very tempting to say, well, the culture has my addiction, I don't have it. Therefore, it is not surprising that our drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts to prove that we could drink like other people. Now, I don't know about you, but what I have tried to prove to myself almost my entire life is that I can consume like other people, and it won't hurt me, right? I can consume like the culture at large. I can indulge in this and that form of excess, and especially the little small excesses, not so bad really, right? Little small excesses, not so bad. Look at everybody else. Everybody else gets away with it. They do just fine. Why not me? Well, There's no way to know exactly. I mean, I think actually other people's excesses, other people's lives are probably just as unmanageable as mine, but maybe they don't notice it. But I do. So there's something I can do about that. And the excesses that I can address actually do affect other people and affect my life as well. So the idea that somehow, someday, we will control and enjoy this drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. You might almost say that the idea that somehow, someday, we will control and enjoy this runaway consumption is the great obsession of everyone living in a developed nation today. The idea that somehow we're going to game this in just the right way and it's going to become magically sustainable. And everybody's going to have enough and everybody's going to be happy and the government's going to run really well. If only there were a free market. If only there were the right regulations. If only, and the list of if onlys goes on, pretty much forever. Those if onlys, that sort of impossible dream that we yearn after, is what keeps us from seeing our own present suffering and acknowledging it and admitting it to ourselves and then doing something about it. That dream is a kind of a wool that we stuff in our ears so we don't hear the cries of our own suffering. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. I mean, we don't have to tweak that at all. The persistence of this illusion that we can consume like everybody else, and that everybody else can consume like us, and that everything will be fine, is astonishing. Many pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. What do we call a culture that continues to poison its own well, poison its own water, that continues to pollute an atmosphere that is poisoning it? What do we call people who poison their own happiness by contributing to the sufferings of others, by indulging in so much excess and so much greed and so much overconsumption and accumulation of surplus that they have all the toys and no one else has anything to play with, right? I mean, what do we call such a person? We could call them rich, call them successful. We could call them happy, perhaps, if we ourselves were very, very deluded and had our eyes closed or just had real blinders on so that we only saw part of somebody's life. Isn't it astounding how often we see celebrities crash and burn? It's because that monocular tunnel vision that we have to focus on them to see them as desirable, to see them as exemplars, to see their lives as somehow better than ours. It takes the strain of maintaining that is too much for them and it's too much for us. So routinely the whole thing has to come crashing down and we have to see the wreckage, piled up just a little bit outside their lives. The lives of a lot of these people are like a person who lives in a house with no garbage service, so that they're constantly having things delivered from everywhere in the world. Huge things, beautiful things, but like all things, they don't last. They break. They get used up. By the way, they don't have a sewage system either, so the shit piles up too. They want to get it away from them, so they're constantly hurling it out the window. So if they look around themselves at their house, beautiful walls, art, personal trainer, this and that, it looks really wonderful, but right outside the walls of the house are mounds and mounds of refuge and shit. Right? That's what it looks like. That's what it really looks like. A city is the same way. Tomorrow I'm going to New York City to give a talk, and I'll ride the bus down to the city, and as I get closer and closer to the city, it's like coming up to Oz. It's this beautiful, the big emerald city, right? The big, high, beautiful skyscrapers. And as I go into the city and start going up and down the avenues, I'll see all kinds of things I want. I'll pass by windows filled with products. Now, I don't like what everybody else likes necessarily, but I'll see things that I want. I'll see bookstores where I want all the books. I'll see office supply stores where I want all the notebooks. I'll see outdoor supply stores where I want all the outdoor supplies, or at least the most expensive ones. I'll pass by restaurants where I want all the best food. Okay? There's even this one little wine bar where I'll go there and I'll see this bottle of wine that I just love to sit down and just drink. So all these things are there. What I don't see is the concentric rings of suffering spreading out from that city that support the life of that city. Products imported from impoverished nations around the world where people work for less than minimum wage, where children work to supply that city with its needs. The garbage that is constantly being churned up and produced in that city that is then dumped a little further and a little further outside the city in larger and larger mounds. I won't see that. But if I open myself up to that and I look at these people, and instead of asking myself, when will the day come when I can consume like the richest people on Fifth Avenue, which is the question at the heart of basically at the heart of everyone living in a developed nation with a really strong, robust economy. Once I stop asking that question and ask another question instead, then that illusion somehow shifts and changes very dramatically. And the new question is, when will I learn to be happy? When will I learn to be happy? It's a different question. When will I learn what my needs are and honor my needs and embrace my needs and fulfill my needs? Needs are finite and relatively easy to fulfill. Desires, not so. Desires are also contagious. There's a man named René Girard who wrote a number of very, very famous books in the last century about mostly about the Bible, but about all aspects of culture. And he believed in something he called mimetic desire. He believes that we don't know what to desire ourselves. We know what our needs are as human beings, our basic needs, because every biological being knows what its needs are. And the earth is in the business of fulfilling them. So it's a pretty straight shot. It's a pretty straightforward thing. But we don't know what to desire, so we look to other people to know what to desire. So we're already living at one remove from ourselves when we begin to desire. We're already living at a small distance to ourselves. And the distance is really just as far as from me to the person who has something that I desire. And that person teaches me what to desire. The possibility, the wonderful grand possibility and mission of the 12 steps of ecological recovery is that we can also teach our needs. We can also know what our needs are and communicate that instead. And how powerful a thing that is when a person knows what their needs are and doesn't worry quite so much about their desires. Now, we can't do this all at once. I love this next section. This is read. I think we should add it to our phone script for our Friday morning phone meetings because it's just such a wonderful little piece of 12-step liturgy. But it goes like this. Read through the 12 steps. It says, remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Remember we deal with an addicted culture, cunning, powerful, baffling. And it says, without help it is too much for us, but there is one who has all power. That one is God. We say in this group, we say the earth. The earth knows. The earth is wise. It will teach us what our needs are. May you find him. May you find earth now. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at a turning point. We asked its protection and with care and complete abandon. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. And here are the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we have our 12 steps, which are almost exactly like them, with the substitution of excess for alcohol and earth for God. Then, after that, there's this sort of magical paragraph. Many of us exclaimed, what an order! I can't go through with it. It says, do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection.